meeting to order. We'll start us off with a land acknowledgement. On behalf of the Seattle Planning Commission, we'd like to actively recognize that we are on Indigenous land, the traditional and current territories of the Coast Salish people who have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We acknowledge the role that traditional Western-centric planning practices have played in harming, displacing, and attempting to erase Native communities, and we commit to identifying racist practices and strive to center restorative land stewardship rather than unsustainable and extractive use of the land. All right, so welcome to any members of the public that we have in attendance. I see we have a few. We are happy to make all of our commission meetings open to the public. Please note that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings since the commission is an advisory body. We provide recommendations to elected leaders, being the mayor and council, that in turn make the actual decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to these elected officials. This meeting is a hybrid meeting with, I don't think any of our actual members today participating remotely, but we do have staff in the boards and commission room at Seattle City Hall, while the rest of us are participating virtually. I did not pick somebody to read a Color Brave space norm in advance of the meeting. So I am going to ask someone to volunteer to read one of these and explain why you picked it and why it's relevant to today's discussion. I am. Caleb, you came on camera. Are you volunteering?
No, but I'm fine.
Okay.
Doing it, sure. Let's go with I always like this one. Keep focused on our collective goal, create racial justice through Black liberation and Native sovereignty. For any meeting, really.
And why do you think it's so relevant to the work that we're doing?
I mean, with the comprehensive plan, I think it's important that we recognize the past harms that have been done through planning practices and focus on our collective goal as we move forward with hopefully planning practices that are looking through that racial justice lens. That's why I chose that one.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
In my day job, we bought a license to be able to use these as well. And just this morning, we had a conversation where we were practicing just that of pulling one forward and describing the applicability. So I was in facilitation mode earlier today, and that's why I pushed you to draw on the applicability. Thank you very much. All right, let's see, where are we in the agenda? I think now we'll go back to the slide with the meeting agenda on it. So for today, we just have one item, which is a working session on the commission's upcoming presentation to the Seattle City Council Select Committee on the Mayor's One Seattle plan. I saw we had one member join us while I was doing the introductions. Do we have quorum, Vanessa?
We do.
Okay. With that in mind, our first order of business is to approve the January 23rd, 2025 meeting minutes. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I so move.
Nick seconds.
Jamie. Oh,
a second.
Beat to the punch.
Nick seconds. All right. Are there any changes or amendments? Right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? And with that, the meeting minutes from January 23rd are approved. Moving on to the chair's report, we have 2 upcoming commission meetings. The next one is the Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting. It's next Thursday, February 20th from 7:30 to 9 a.m. And as with our committee meetings, this meeting will be held online using the MS Teams platform. And then our next full commission meeting is Thursday, February 27th from 7:30 to 9 a.m. And that will be a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely while others participate in person in the Boards and Commissions room at Seattle City Hall. I will pass it off to staff, Vanessa, for announcements and commission business.
Thank you, Michaela. As Michaela noted, this is a hybrid meeting with actually planning commission staff here in the Boards and Commissions room and all commissioners joining the call via the MS Teams platform. We are not joined by any members of the public at this time in the Boards and Commissions room at City Hall. We do have a number of individuals who are joining us via the Teams platform, and we welcome you. I would like to remind commissioners that to invite you all to please use the chat function to be recognized by the chair to speak. I will do my best to assist Michaela in making sure we keep a queue and make sure people are called on in the order that they have joined the chat function. And just a reminder also to please only use the chat function to be recognized to speak and not to use it for substantive comment, as people calling into the meeting will not have access to the chat. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michaela to do a round of introductions.
All right, with our introductions, please provide your name, your preferred pronouns, where you live, and if you're comfortable sharing what you do for your day job. And I can get started. My name is Michaela Daffern. I'm co-chair of the Seattle Planning Commission. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and in my day job, I work in affordable housing policy and planning. And I will pass it off to my co-chair, Jamie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Strobel. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in the future Pinehurst 130th Station area. I work in climate change and environmental justice, and I will pass to Caleb.
Hi, everyone. My name's Caleb Twolday, he, him pronouns. I live in Beacon Hill, and I'm an educator at Rainier Scholars. And I'll pass it to Matt Hutchins.
My name is Matt Hutchins. I use he, him pronouns. I am an architect. I live in West Seattle, and I will pass it to the other Matt.
Thanks, Matt. I'm Matt Malloy, he, him pronouns. I am the Get Engaged commissioner, and I work at the Queen Anne Beer Hall, living in Green Lake. And I'll pass it to Nick.
Hi, everyone. Nick Whipple. I use he, him pronouns. I live in West Seattle in the North Delridge neighborhood. And for my day job, I'm a planner on the east side. How about Deanna?
Good afternoon. I'm Diana Quintanar. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and for my day job, I'm a multimodal transportation planner. Sorry, if someone can help me pass it on to someone that has not gone.
How about Radhika?
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Radhika Nayak. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Wedgwood in North Seattle, and in my day job, I am a planner. I will pass it to Andy.
Hi, Andy Dannenberg, he, him, live in Northeast Seattle, and I teach at the University of Washington in public health and in urban planning. And I can't really tell who hasn't gone yet.
Does it mean it is?
Hi, Zio Alvarez, she, they pronouns. I live in White Center Highland Park, and I'm a designer at an architecture firm downtown Seattle. This is staff.
Yes. Did we skip Caleb or?
Oh, no, we got
We
Caleb.
did, okay, sorry. I was
Did we?
spacing out. Hi, everyone. Olivia Baker. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission. John?
I am John Hoy, staff to the Planning Commission. I use he, him pronouns.
Robin?
Robin McGonigal, staff to the commission. I use she, they pronouns, and I live on Vashon Island.
And I'll wrap this up. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of the all-volunteer Seattle Planning Commission. With that, we're going to move into our public comment. I want to let everybody know that we're providing additional options to provide public comment in person here in the boards and commissions room of the Seattle City Hall, submitted to me via email at least 8 hours before the meeting, or offered on our hybrid meeting platform, MS Teams. If offering comment during the meeting via MS Teams, please raise your hand in the MS Teams meeting to be recognized to speak during the public comment portion at the beginning of the agenda. If dialing in by phone to the meeting, please email Vanessa Murdoch at seattle.gov and indicate your name and the phone number you're calling from so I can call on you and you may be recognized to speak. I did not receive any emails offering public comment prior to this meeting. I will note that this is our first meeting taking public comment on the Teams platform, so please be patient with us if we encounter some technical difficulties. I do see one member of the public who's joining us via MS Teams does have their hand up. I will call on that individual after Michaela offers some general comments regarding our public comment, which is a 2-minute period for each public commenter.
Okay, thank you. So the commission provides time for public comments at all meetings. A reminder that we do not hold public hearings and we are an advisory body. We make recommendations to elected leaders who in turn make the actual decisions. Individuals who make comments to the commission should remember that the mayor and the city council make the decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. And with that, I invite individuals in the audience to offer public comment. And as Vanessa already noted, please keep your comments to 2 minutes. And Vanessa, are you calling on folks or am I?
I am calling on folks,
Okay.
and right now we have one person, and that person is Sarah Jane. Give us a moment, Sarah, because we need to unmute you or give you access or whatever it is we're trying to do. Sarah, please go ahead.
She should be good. I just made her a presenter.
Yeah, you'll just have to unmute yourself if you're trying to speak, Sarah Jane.
Sarah Jane, we cannot unmute you from our end. So if you go to the people section of the Teams meeting, you'll see your name there at the top. There you go. Nope. And if you click on the icon that has a microphone with the slash through it, that should unmute you.
You're still muted, Sarah Jane. Vanessa, do we have anybody else in the room?
We do not.
Okay.
And I apologize, Sarah Jane. As I said, there's no way for us to unmute you from our end. We keep trying.
There's nothing we can do. I made her a presenter, so I don't have an option to do anything.
All right. Sarah Jane, if you would care to, if you happen to have your remarks that you were planning on offering, If you would email them to me, I'm happy to read them on your behalf. My email address, I will spell it out, is V as in Victor, A-N as in Nancy, E-S as in Sam, S as in Sam, A, period, Murdoch, M as in Mary, U-R-D as in David, O-C-K as in Kevin, at seattle.gov.
All right. Well, thank you. You know, as we transition to this new way of giving public comment, we assumed there would be kinks, and here we are encountering encountering that. So it's a good learning lesson for all of us. And with that, I will move us on to our one and only agenda item, which is a working session on the Planning Commission's upcoming comments to Seattle City Council Select Committee on the Mayor's One Seattle Plan. We're holding this working session to prepare for our comments as to council as they consider the plan for adoption. Commission staff will walk us through key themes and issues we want to touch on in our presentation. And we have until 5 p.m. for this agenda item if needed. With that, I turn the floor over to Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the first time as a full commission we've had the opportunity to walk through our strategy for preparing to present to the Select Committee of the Seattle City Council on the comprehensive plan. I will note for members of the public listening in, the Select Committee is comprised of all City Council members. They have met 4 times as a full committee so far this year. They first met on January 6th when they received a briefing from the Office of Planning and Community Development regarding the background of developing the One Seattle Plan and the process by which it was developed. Then on January 15th, the Office of Planning and Community Development staff offered an overview of the preferred growth strategy that is found in the One Seattle Plan. On January 19th, the Office of Innovation and Performance, which is within the Central Budget Office, walked through an anti-displacement action plan that they prepared. And then the last committee meeting was on February 5th, when the Office of Planning and Community Development gave a presentation on the 2+ year public engagement process that they have undertaken, engaging with community members across the city. Also on February 5th, there was a public hearing, which started at 5 and ended shortly after 10:30 in the evening and was cut short at 10:30 in the evening due to inclement weather and concern about getting people home safely who were in City Hall. So I give that overview to you all as a starting, or one of the starting points for you all as you think about what you want to be presenting to City Council. We have been invited to the Select Committee. The exact date has not yet been determined or published. When it is, I will let you all know. And in committees up until this point, Planning Commission committees, we've discussed a strategy that starts with the letter that the Planning Commission wrote last April of 2024 in response to the draft plan that was released. Also as a starting point, looking to our letter of December of last year, when you all composed a letter in response to the zoning implementation proposal that was put forward by city staff starting in the middle of October. Planning Commission staff and several commissioners as well have listened in to all of the Select Committee meetings on the comp plan thus far, and are going to be walking through what we have heard thus far and propose a strategy of our presentation, I should say your presentation, to the Select Committee based on the work, based on what you have gone on record thus far as stating regarding the plan, as well as addressing some specific questions and comments that have been raised by City Council members as they have had their 4 meetings thus far this year. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Olivia.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. So before we jump into a discussion on what you all would like to include in the presentation to council, we wanted to just do a quick kind of recap of the high level of the comments that were included in the letter from the commission on the draft plan, as it was almost a year ago now, back in April of 2024, when that letter was drafted. And so again, this is just a sort of refresh your memories of what comments that the group has made in the past around the comp plan. And if you were in the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee meeting earlier this month, some of these will look familiar to you. So around housing in the draft letter, the commission noted that the city should promote better housing choice by allowing more types of homes for more types of households everywhere in the city, increase housing supply overall to improve affordability, consider impacts of concentrating multifamily housing along major arterials, and promote access to daily needs through density and mixed use in more areas. Related to displacement, the commission noted that while the group appreciated the appendix in the plan listing many policies that are throughout the plan related to displacement, the group asked how will those policies be used together as one cohesive strategy, and how will the city hold itself accountable to community organizations that participated in drafting the comprehensive plan. In sections related to climate and environmental health, the letter noted that the city should include strategies to ensure an equitable transition to zero carbon energy, strengthen commitment to achieving racial and social equity and health outcomes, foster stable and resilient frontline communities through affordable housing and anti-displacement policies, and consider factors like noise and air pollution when citing affordable housing in particular, all housing, but affordable housing in particular. And in the transportation section, the letter noted a need to allocate street space to reinforce our land use vision, establish measurable targets in the plan, reform parking policies for both on-street and off-street parking, and recognize the changed relationship between job centers and neighborhoods due to increased remote work. So as Vanessa mentioned, staff have been listening into the council discussion so far on their review of the draft comprehensive plan. And we want to just give a few highlights for folks who haven't had the chance to read any news articles about it or tune into any of those meetings, just some excerpts of what we've been hearing so far. So these are comments and questions raised by council members in the course of the discussion. We've heard council members note that the city needs more housing options, especially for workforce housing and homeownership opportunities. They've noted a concern about the engagement process being insufficient. They've suggested that they want more than just townhomes to be built and asked how they can promote more types of housing to be built in the city. They've noted that they want to make sure what is built is affordable with a wide range of affordability, and they noted specifically that townhomes starting at around 700,000, for example, are too expensive. They noted that the city could utilize arterials for adding density since they're better equipped, they being the arterials, to handle growth. They've noted a desire to balance density with tree canopy protection. They've noted a desire to have affordable, accessible, livable, and safe housing. They've noted single-family homes can house multiple generations, and they don't want to lose that access to that type of housing. And they've noted that this comprehensive plan is planning for the long term, and they want to make sure that we build a city that works in the long term for housing, utilities, and infrastructure. And of course, this comes from a variety of council members, so it's not just one person. There's many, many voices being listed here. And I'll turn it over to you, Vanessa.
Great. I'll just note, I put in the chat the link to the Seattle Planning Commission website where we have our letters that we have written regarding the One Seattle plan, the draft One Seattle plan. Those are posted. And for commissioners, I also sent those via email earlier today because we really do want to ground our suggestions and our recommendations and our observations in what we have already said on the record. What commissioners have, points that the commissioners have raised so far regarding growth strategy and housing. The Planning Commission supports the proposed growth strategy because it works towards bringing additional housing capacity to reduce pressure while also opening up more neighborhoods to more households and providing greater housing choice. Both House Bill 1110 changes and neighborhood centers are necessary. And we want to emphasize, or you all want to emphasize, that the One Seattle plan is a good start. I think in previous conversations, the commission has said this is a good floor. This is not a ceiling, but it's a good start. The Planning Commission would also like to emphasize the systematic network nature of neighborhood centers. Centers are an interconnected network, and removing one has ripple effects across the system, not just the immediate neighbors who may live in the neighborhood center or adjacent to the center, and really looking at this collection of neighborhood centers in a holistic manner that gets us closer to that 15-minute city. Commissioners have also noted the need for both middle housing and mid-rise level density. 5-story buildings are the minimum threshold, the minimum height to allow the private market to produce affordable housing at scale. We need to maintain our LR3 zoning in centers to provide housing choice in more neighborhoods across the city. And building on the theme of a network, we also need a network of affordability levels. We need to consider how availability of housing at different affordability levels impacts housing choice. And I would say we don't only need that network of affordability levels, we're required to provide that network of affordability levels. Next slide, please. Another suggestion to address the growth strategy in housing. Commissioners wanted to make a point that Seattle needs a diverse workforce to support a diversity of jobs across sectors. People in those jobs need a vibrant and healthy housing stock to choose the type and location of housing that is affordable to them. So once again, remembering that the comprehensive plan lays out a strategy and supporting policies for how the city will accommodate both residential growth as employment growth. And you can't really talk about one without talking about the other if you want to be putting together a holistic 20-year vision for how the city is going to grow. Next slide.
Yeah, I think we just have a couple.
Yep, we're almost done.
Couple more slides here for comments we've heard so far before we open it back up to discussion. So around the topic of displacement, commissioners have noted concern about accommodating existing small businesses in third places as neighborhood centers are implemented, and would like to propose the suggestion that the city expand MR zones to create the concept of these empty seat locations of places for businesses to move to if their buildings redevelop. Another comment was that many of the solutions for housing affordability and displacement happen outside of the comprehensive plan process. The comprehensive plan can't be the sort of be-all end-all tool to solve these issues. And so while the comprehensive plan helps to build the environment, the policy environment for success, there's the opportunity for city council and the city to follow through with future policy decisions, implementation, and allocation of resources to make those happen. And commissioners also noted that anti-displacement policies and programs also work as a network. And so, we could refer back to the presentation given by the Office of Innovation and Performance that the council just received at the end of January, and the executive order from the mayor's office to note sort of the variety of programs and policies that already exist in the city and how those need to be able to function together for displacement. And then the last slide here, related to comments on climate change, environmental health, and transportation. These points were raised that building walkable, non-car dependent communities within the city is a form of a climate strategy. If we can reduce car dependence, reduce sprawl, and improve access to resources, we can get closer to creating a responsible growth strategy that really builds towards reducing emissions and building climate resilience. The commissioners noted a need to consider environmental health and justice when we add density. So neighborhood centers, for example, are a tool for adding density without packing multifamily housing along major arterials. And then finally, commissioners have noted that the The city needs to allocate street space to reinforce the land use vision. Those two visions have to work together. So the transportation element should provide right-of-way allocation guidance that really supports the growth strategy. That's an overview. I believe that's the last one. Yes, that's what we've heard so far in the discussions that have come in committees. And I'll pass it back to Vanessa and Michaela to move us into discussion.
Thank you. So I'm just emailing you all the PowerPoint that we just spoke to so that you can refer back to it. Thank you, Jamie, for that suggestion. And really the point of today is we want to vet the commissioner's suggestions so far with the full commission and see if there are additional comments that you all would like to include in the presentation. I'll take a moment, and while we don't know exactly when the presentation will be, it will be, we think, at a scheduled select committee of the City Council on the comprehensive plan. It will not be the one that's next week. That agenda is already set. It will probably be sometime in March, on the 5th of March or the 19th of March. We'll have about 20 minutes. We don't have to take the full 20 minutes. When we've discussed the strategy for what we want to present to council, we have talked about being very concise and cogent in the recommendations that are presented. Not thinking that this is the time to really throw a bunch of detail at city council members, but rather to have some strong and concise speaking points that would then be backed up by references to data where we can find data supporting our points that council members and their staff can follow up if they so choose. But choosing not to try and get really deep in the weeds with the council members unless they want to, but really thinking about a pretty short, relatively short presentation that hits the highlights and doesn't take up too much time so that the commissioners will be in a position, who are joining me at the table, will be in a position to answer questions the council members may have. So with that, I would say I invite commissioners to put their name in the chat with some either initial reactions, thumbs up, thumbs down, sounds good. We'd like more, we'd like less, just what your initial thoughts are.
I know we are 1 minute, 2 minutes away from losing Matt Hutchins. You have to leave at 3:40, is that correct?
Yeah.
Matt and Andy, you okay if I call on him first? Okay, okay.
This will be quite short. One of the consistent themes through the commentary at the council meetings has been tree canopy, and yet in the FEIS, one of the things that is missing is the idea that supporting tree canopy is a municipal mission. There's a lot of housing versus trees as a dialectic, but the real thing that I would want to have drawn out from the Planning Commission to council is that most of the tree loss is on public land, and most of the potential for new canopy is on public land, parks, streets. And so it is not necessary to make this a trees versus housing issue, where if the city council will embrace a robust plan to plant way more trees where we already own the park space. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Quick clarification, Matt. Where can we find that in the FEIS, or do you have a link to that information?
I will. It's under the tree. I'll find it. I'll figure it out where it is. But
great. Thanks, Matt.
Sure.
I think that's we have been talking about how trees and housing can coexist, and it's sort of a yes and of we can grow while preserving our tree canopy. It might just be take a little bit more thought about where we prioritize investments in tree canopy. But Matt did sort of just introduce a topic that a solution that was a little bit more specific maybe than we've talked about in the past. And so before we move on to a different topic, just wanted to open up space for commissioners to react to that in case you have a difference of opinion. Unless, Vanessa, you're writing in the chat box that we have already talked about that idea, because you know.
Nope, I just put a
Okay.
link. I put a link to the FEIS, which is 1,307 pages or something like that. So it's not a quick read. And hopefully Matt can give us a link to where to go to. It is hyperlinked though within the document. So if you go to the table of contents and read through that, which itself is about 5 or 6 pages long, you can click on those titles and it'll take you to various parts of the EIS.
Jamie asked in the chat if we could recap his suggestion. Her audio cut out for a minute. Matt indicated that trees are sort of a municipal tree canopy, and preserving that and growing that is a municipal responsibility, and that the majority of the tree canopy in the city is on public land, and that there is a way for housing, denser housing and tree canopies to both increase in the city through a robust strategy of protect or increasing tree canopy on public lands. Is that what he said?
Yes.
Okay. Nick, you unmuted yourself. Oh, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, if I have a chance to echo, because I'm in a unique position with the Get Engaged cohort. I get to meet with commissioners and other commissions, and I've talked at length with someone on the Urban Forestry Commission, and I don't know if they're going to be at the select committee or if they're giving recommendations on the comprehensive plan as well. But, to echo what Matt was saying, when a tree is on private land, there's nothing that, even like if a new tree is planted in a development or if it's an old growth tree that's sitting on an existing plot, there's nothing to guarantee the health of that tree. The city has no regulation over how that tree is taken care of. And so the trees that are on public property are trees that can be, enjoy a healthy life and thrive, rather than trees that we're mandating through open space requirements or other issues that the council might be suggesting. I'm just agreeing with Matt and echoing his sentiment. I haven't seen the statistics though, so I want to look at those myself too.
Nick?
Well, to kind of piggyback on Matt Hutchins' comment too, I know we have talked about in some of our housing and neighborhoods committees just how it's problematic to kind of frame this tree versus housing density as these opposing forces, when I think the city is also grappling with that, and we've heard that from OPCD staff as well, on how can we address and respond to some of our canopy growth targets. And I think it's helpful to kind of redirect or reinforce the strategies that OPC has put forward to help balance that. In part, that was that open space requirement that they were providing that the commission kind of weighed in on. That would be as part of a middle housing development. They need to set aside land for open space. The city also has pretty robust tree regulations where they're already requiring either retention or replanting through development. So there's a lot of layering of development regulations that kind of get at that question of how do we get more sort of open space or tree canopy while also balancing our housing. And so I do feel like, I know initially I wasn't quite convinced. I felt like they were maybe a little too far on demanding or prescribing open space and being a little too limiting on kind of the flexibility that I think middle housing really requires for it to take hold and for it to be successful in Seattle. But I also can appreciate sort of the comments that OPCD is having to consider and weigh. And so I think even just helping the council feel comfort maybe in sort of this as a really good starting point and a good compromise that's trying to address both needs. Yeah, that's all I have there.
So I'm hearing a lot of yeses, yeses with details. And I think this conversation is helpful. I do think trees are going to continue to be a concern that comes up in meetings. And so for us as a commission to talk through this. I think it's going to help whoever's at the select committee field any questions that they may get from members of the council about what our thoughts are on tree protection and increasing tree canopy. Jamie just dropped a link in the chat box to the Seattle Urban Forest Management Plan. And Zio just said in the chat box, the 2021 tree canopy assessment is also interesting and shared a link to that as well. Any final comments on this? We have another member who's indicated they have to leave early, but I don't want to cut this short if there's more discussion warranted. Okay, seeing none. I did see you're in the queue, Matt Malloy, but I'm going to call on Andy next because he has to leave at 4:15.
Yeah, I actually want to add to what you've already been talking about with a couple of comments. One is I'm surprised at the comment that most of the trees are on public land, because when I think of a lot of single family dwellings going to duplexes or quadruplexes, that's a lot of trees that do exist on private property that would be lost. And I don't know that there's that much public property where you could really increase a lot more trees on public property to make up for that. I don't have any idea what those numbers are, but it just would really surprise me that trees on private property are not a substantial part of the overall canopy. But directly related to that is the concept of impervious surfaces and stormwater runoff, that if you are removing trees from private property, then and increasing impervious surfaces, you're going to run into stormwater issues. And I think that ought to at least be considered as you're considering tree canopy, is consider impervious surface and stormwater.
I just added into the chat really quick that I think public lands is inclusive of right of way, and that's why it might be like more land than we think it is. It's not just like parks, it's also like all the green spaces and strips along sidewalks and roads and all that.
Yeah, but still, a single family house occupies what proportion of a usual lot? It just seems to me as a fairly good part of tree canopies on the private component of single family houses, but I have no knowledge of the numbers.
Andy, what I can do is to track down Matt and get that information. He seemed to be quoting or referencing something that is in the final EIS and is a statement of fact. So I will track that down and share it with everybody.
Okay. Do you know if stormwater is mentioned in there? Because that is part of it.
Stormwater is definitely mentioned in there. I was coming through a bit of the FEIS today. Again, over 1,300 pages. So I can't describe it verse by verse, but definitely saw utilities, saw stormwater management, and a variety of other. And as I said, I did put a link in the chat to the full FEIS and encourage all commissioners who have an interest in this specific area to go and link through the table of contents to the areas that you're interested in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be interested in, Vanessa, if you can find the quote that Matt was looking for, because in the tree canopy assessment, it says that single family land contributes to 47% of the city's tree canopy. And that's not including the right of way, which is a separate designation. So I just heard different things than what Matt said, but if the EIS says it, then it's going to be the closest thing we have to fact. So I'd just love to know what page or whatever that's on that Matt was talking about.
We will try to.
Sorry, I've been flipping through the EIS and the tree canopy report in the background. I think what it is that parks and right of way provide like 41% of overall tree canopy, and private land is 47%. So in quantity of tree canopy, there's more on private land, but losses are higher on public land, and redevelopment doesn't significantly contribute to tree canopy loss in residential areas. Most tree loss is not attributed to that. There is my sort of moving between the two documents understanding. So the impact of tree loss in the city is being felt most on public land in the right of way or in parks.
And I'll just reinforce that I've heard some statistics about trees on public land, and what Zio just summarized is what I have heard from others. So could you provide some page citations?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that would help people.
Yeah. So tree canopy in the final EIS is on page 450. It's 3.6-38. And then in the 2021 assessment, I was kind of looking through, there's findings by management unit and ownership group that start on page 34. And then there's a feature table on page 37 that's specifically about the impact of development on tree canopy in residential areas.
Okay. If we add anything into our presentation to council, I think it's just important that we ground it in information that we can find and cite confidently from the FEIS or the Urban Forestry Management Plan.
Do you mind putting that in the chat? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Matt Malloy did
I
have
was
to
like-
step away for a second, and he was one of the ones that was interested in that. Jamie's saying she agrees, I think, with what I just said. She also said also
No, you don't need to say
1,037
you don't need
pages.
to say that out loud, Michaela. That's so embarrassing.
I don't know. From an accessibility perspective, I don't know if everybody can see the chat. So sorry. Hello, we are committed to an Open Public Meetings Act. Recentering ourselves in the conversation. Vanessa and staff, do you feel like you have what you need on this topic in order to prepare some slides or to draft some slides that the commission can look at?
Yes, thanks to you all for bringing that up and for the clarification. And we'll also do a little bit. I haven't looked at the 2021 tree canopy report, and I'm wondering if what the most recent data that FEIS used, seeing that the FEIS is finalized in 2025, the tree canopy report is 2021. So we'll do a little sleuthing around where the information is coming from and when that information was verified and quoted.
Okay. All right. Well, Matt Malloy, are you back?
I'm back. I heard people
Okay.
laughing, but I don't know what that was about.
Oh, no, we weren't laughing at you. It's okay.
Oh, that's good. I was gonna recenter the conversation. I like what we've talked about with the tree canopy so far. Vanessa, you mentioned we want to give like a short presentation, and in the past, when we've written like a short letter, it's been like 16 pages. So I'm kind of curious, what is the time frame for like a short presentation mean? Like, what's our goal here in minutes or in terms of slides?
Yes, thank you for that question, Matt. So our goal, we're not drafting a letter. We don't have the time to write as a 16-member body and revise and approve a letter. So instead, we are preparing a PowerPoint presentation, staff is, that takes as a basis the comments and recommendations the Planning Commission is already on record for saying. And we have 20 minutes. I don't think we may need that full 20 minutes. My suggestion would be, as I said earlier, and sorry to repeat myself, but to make the PowerPoint as concise and cogent as possible, with a follow-up document that has data or maybe even embedded within the PowerPoint, resources that people can then drill down into, but not try to drill down into the weeds of debating percentages and numbers like that. So I'm thinking, I don't know off the top of my head, I don't have a specific number of slides in mind. However, I do think that it'll be interesting to see if our slide deck is actually ends up being more accessible for more people beyond the city council. So the slide deck will be put in the agenda that is released by city council, I believe 48 hours before the meeting. And all members of the public, anybody who wants to look on the city council's website or the clerk's website will have access to that slide deck. And so I've been really thinking about how to make this slide deck. Obviously, the primary audience are the Seattle City Council members. However, I believe a secondary audience are people who are just wanting to understand this process and this plan and what the plan is supposed to do, understand it without having to read through the entire plan or the full FEIS. That would be final environmental impact statement.
Great, thank you. So is it 20 minutes for presentation and questions, or 20 minutes just for presentation and questions go on as long as they need?
I believe it's 20 minutes for a presentation, and Q&A will last as long as the committee chair has time for. I will note in the four select committee meetings that have taken place thus far, one of them did not have any spoken public comment because the public hearing was that night. But in the other 3 meetings, public comment went over an hour, and that was after being shortened to 1 minute in some cases. Public comment occurs first at city council meeting, much like it does for us as well. So it is really up to the committee chair. If we have a 2-hour committee meeting on the agenda and 1 hour of that is set aside for public comment, that means we then have an hour for, and we aren't the only people on the agenda. Central staff will also be introducing issue identification at the same meeting as us. So my suggestion is going to be to err on the side of brevity without sacrificing content, so as to allow as much time as is possible for council members to ask questions. And of course, they can always follow up with us. We've made that offer. We're happy to meet with them one-on-one or follow up with questions they may have.
Great, thank you. Last question, is this slideshow that we're seeing right now only internal facing, or is it going to kind of be the skeleton that we start to build off of for the presentation in the future?
Somewhere in between. So we prepared it for the commission. It's pretty short because there's a lot of shorthand in here in terms of you all are familiar with what you said back in April of last year and in the December meeting. The slide deck that we put together for the presentation to the select committee is going to have a little bit more introductory information. What is the role of the planning commission? Who are the planning commissioners? When was the planning commission established? What do they do? How often do they meet? Are they volunteers? Do they get paid? What professions and lived life experiences do they all bring to the table? Just to set the stage so that council members know who they're speaking to. And we'll have representatives from the commission at the table with me. So I would say we'll build from this, but this is certainly something to build from, not to whittle down.
Great, thank you. I'll let someone else go now.
I have another process question. Is this our last discussion on the slide deck before it is presented?
It could be.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I don't have a hard and fast date for the select committee. So I would err on the side of caution and say this will probably, or could be, the last time the full commission has discussed this. We have discussed this a number of times in committee though, prior to this meeting. So hopefully this isn't absolutely brand new news for too many people. And for those for whom it is brand new news, happy to talk to you and provide you additional information to bring you all up to speed.
All right, with that in mind, I think it's a new time to harvest hands for discussion. How do folks feel about the content here? What else would you like to see reinforced? Jamie dropped her name in the queue.
I don't know if I have a suggestion what to be reinforced so much as a question. Vanessa, because I know that commission staff have been able to attend all the meetings thus far, and so I'm just curious. I was looking at what has come up in the council select committee thus far. And one of thank you for pulling up that slide. I was trying to find it again. And I was curious about the engagement process being insufficient bullet point, and if they got a presentation on the engagement process and from OPCD or city staff at all yet.
Yes, city council received a presentation by Office of Planning and Community Development staff on the public engagement process, and that was at the February 5th meeting. That was a 2-hour meeting. There was quite a robust conversation, but OPCD, I think, did a good job of a comprehensive presentation of all the meetings that were held, when they were held, what kind of input was solicited. There remained a number of council members who were concerned about not everybody being reached. There was quite a robust public comment period where people were stating that they only just learned about this plan. And so I think council members are in the position of hearing a lot from their constituents who are just learning of this process and may not be hearing as much from their constituents who have been involved for the last 2 years. As part of the commissioner introductions, when we do present to council, we have talked about the commissioners who are at the table noting what public meetings they went to, both last spring and in the fall, and what district you live in. I don't think we necessarily want to lead with trying to talk about the public engagement that we think OPC did a good job, but it wasn't our public engagement process to speak to. I think we can be supportive of what was done, but really focus our presentation on the opinions and the observations and the recommendations of the commission, as opposed to leading with, we think the public engagement plan was great and we think it was sufficient. I think we can certainly speak to it, but we don't want to make it, I would not suggest making it the focal point of our presentation.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I think one way, if you get questions on it, one way is to talk about the plan. As stewards of the plan, we did get pretty consistent updates from OPCD on what they're hearing in their community engagement. And so we as a commission had a couple of opportunities to sort of learn what they were hearing, and then to assess whether or not the direction the plan was headed in was reflective of the input that they had received to date. And so I think you could say this plan appears to be grounded in the engagement work that the city did do, if it is like a thing, but I agree that it doesn't need to be like a leading point in the presentation. Unless Jamie, you have a difference of opinion there, because you were actually professionally involved in some of the engagement.
I was just curious, like what was behind
Okay.
that and what kind of information they've already gotten.
Yeah. Okay. We have up next, Radhika.
I was thinking that one point we could emphasize would be how neighborhood centers would help decentralize jobs and offer amenities to folks, but also offer ways for people to work in smaller formats closer to where the housing is. And that could be something that's interesting to council members.
Thanks, Radhika. I think we allude to that somewhere in one of the sets of notes. And just today, as I was thinking about this meeting and what to say, because there has been so much focus on housing, which is absolutely appropriate. The other side of the housing coin, or one other side of the multi-sided coin, is employment and providing employment opportunities where people are living and provide living opportunities in healthy environments where people are working. Obviously not in industrial areas or whatnot, but so I think it is important to remember, rolling way back to what is the purpose of the plan? The purpose of the plan is to provide a growth strategy for residential, for housing, and for employment, and that those two do need to work together and reinforce and support each other.
And we have learned through COVID just how wonderful our local businesses and our local business districts are. And that's where a lot of us have spent a lot of our time. And I know that was a point, I don't know if Deanna's still on the call, but that the jobs and neighborhoods thing is something that has come up in our commission meetings before. I'm looking for any comments on this topic before we move on. Jamie, you have a follow-up question to this?
Sorry, I misspoke. I meant just
Okay.
comment, which
Sorry.
is just this is in the slides already, but re-emphasizing based on what you're saying of the neighborhood centers, like it being a connected system. So we can't just like cherry pick one or one here and one there to take out, right? Like it's meant to be a network of those all across the city. And so I saw that in the bullet points, but I wanted to just highlight because I know we've talked about that.
All right, Zio.
This is a first draft thought. But I've been reflecting on the more than just townhomes bullet on this page. And I know we have people on the commission who are like very fluent in speaking to what it takes to develop things that are not just townhomes. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that we could kind of surface some of that knowledge. I know we've heard from OPCD staff, both in public meetings and in this space, that like the stacked flat option has a lot of challenges in front of it. And so I'm wondering if highlighting like what levers city council or what political plays city council could make, or the mayor could support, that might make more than just townhomes more possible in the city is one thing. And then I don't know, I'm personally, to be like mildly vulnerable here, the affordability conversation is hard for me because I think that in the context of the comprehensive plan, so much of it gets talked about in terms of home ownership. And as a renter majority city and as a young person, like attempting to envision a future in the city that includes like my peers and friends and people who, you know, make more or make less than me, like it's really difficult to imagine home ownership here. And I just feel like an opportunity to bring back the fact that, or mention at least the fact that like the majority of people who live here rent, and expanding the choices of affordability for those folks is as important as expanding the opportunities for homeownership in at least like a near-term future. Feels like something that like I want to make sure gets mentioned somewhere.
Thank you for that, Zio. I couldn't agree more. When you look at the housing needs that Seattle has and you think about what you would need to make in order to be able to afford an entry-level home, an average shift worker in Seattle's never going to, not making enough to even come close to approaching that. And so a huge piece of Seattle's housing growth needs to be homes that are affordable to people who make at or below 80% of AMI. And that's really going to be a rental unit format for most of those households. And some of those units are going to need to be subsidized. So totally agree. And perhaps there's a way to ground that in the housing needs conversation, and the what type of housing the city has decided is most likely going to serve the housing needs that they have, and bringing in some tenure information. That might be too much information for the presentation, but could be follow-up remarks that whoever's at the select committee representing us could offer if it's brought up. Because yes, the way we grow is not just about making sure that people can afford to buy a house. It's making sure that on a monthly basis, they're not paying more than 30% of their income on their housing costs. And as a majority renter city, we have to think about the needs of renters as well.
And that
Jamie
is
said plus
certainly
one. Yeah.
Certainly
Go ahead,
consistent
Vanessa.
with, sorry, that's certainly consistent with what the commission has said in your letters last year in terms of the need to recognize the city as a renter majority city and to meet the needs of all residents.
And Zio, on your other point, the policy levers and getting specific about policy ideas, that, I mean, it would be wonderful to be that engaged in this conversation, but I'm afraid we probably wouldn't have time to get into
Yeah.
novel new ideas and solutions. Too much? Vanessa, what were your thoughts when Zio mentioned that piece?
I think we should encourage city council to avail themselves of city staff to come up with those levers and incentives for building things, building housing types that are other than townhomes. In fact, I remember Councilmember Moore even saying, how can we get things beyond, how can we get housing choices beyond townhomes? I would suggest that we maybe stop short, given the time, of actually suggesting specific policies, because then there can be the misconception that you all are working for the city 8 hours a day and can actually come up with these policies. And that is not the case. And you all are an advisory body to point out connections perhaps in the city and resources beyond us that can get more into the details, such as, the great staff at the Office of Housing. That would be my response.
And Jamie, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I can ask it out loud. I'm just curious if we know if the Renters Commission has presented to the select committee or weighed in on the comp plan update at all or anything like that. Vanessa, do you know?
I am on their website right now in real time. And I'm not seeing the most recent statement that they have is Seattle Renters Commission letter regarding the 2025-26 budget proposal. I can follow up with their staff though, and see if they have weighed in, if they wrote a letter last year or in December, or if they're planning on forwarding comments along to the select committee. So I am seeing Seattle Renters Commission letter in support of updating Seattle's comprehensive plan to protect renters. So that might be a good place to start.
Okay, I think up next is Radhika. Did you go? Theo?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Matt. Are you, Matt Malloy, are you next?
My connection might be poor. I'm just putting some quotes to look at that are related to what we were talking about earlier as I got sucked into the FEIS rabbit hole, but I'm going to try to reconnect now to people.
Okay. Yeah, your connection is a little choppy right now. I want to see if anybody we haven't heard from wants to weigh in.
Michaela, I will just add, this is Vanessa, that I did drop a link in the chat to the Renters Commission letter on supporting renters in the comprehensive plan, and that was from May of last year. For individuals who are listening in, who may not have access to the chat, you can find that by just going to the Seattle Renters Commission website, and it's pretty easy to find.
All right. Andy left us. He is off to go teach the next generation of urban and public health, urban planning and public health professionals. While we're on this slide, one of the things that I haven't brought it forward because I don't know if it's where the conversation's going, but we have spent a lot of time as a commission talking about reframing where growth should go and what kind of infrastructure and conditions we need in order to be able to be concentrating housing on them. And so the bullet around utilizing arterials for density, since they are better equipped to handle growth. In one respect, sure, maybe they have more sidewalks and like sewer connections and whatnot. But on the other hand, we have had a tremendous amount of conversation about how that shouldn't be the only choice that renters have and that people living in multifamily housing, yes, that people in multifamily housing have. And if you look at the areas in the city zone for multifamily, there's a spinal network along our arterials that's really, really thin. And Nick's mentioning something I said several months ago about punching into the neighborhoods. And I don't know if that is necessarily one of the few slides that you talk about, but for me, I think we have a role as a commission, and we've developed some consensus around that being kind of an environmental justice issue. And in the absence of the city having studied it, I continue to remain concerned about that being the way that we are growing. And I think it's a real missed opportunity, both from a creating quality of life opportunities for folks in multifamily buildings, but also as a means of, that network that we're thinking of. The more density you have away from the arterials, the more likely you are to have people who can walk to things. So it just feels to me like we are nervous about making people who live in neighborhood residential areas experience and take on some burdens of this growth as a city. Our urban villages have been carrying that way for a really long time. Low income residents carrying the burden of not having access to all the neighborhoods in Seattle. I don't know, it bothers me that like we're continually having to remind folks like maybe it's not always super wonderful to live on an arterial. So I don't know. Vanessa, is there a reason why it's hasn't been pulled forward as like one of the key points to reinforce?
I wouldn't say it's. I would say that would be a sin of omission rather than commission. I don't think we're intentionally avoiding that. Okay. And I do think talking about touching on how.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I take my comment back. It's there.
Yeah, well, and also to add on to this, to the second bullet point on the slide, just to speak to how infrastructure investments are made. And for instance, Metro doesn't provide a bunch of bus routes to a neighborhood that doesn't have the density to support those bus routes. The density occurs, and then Metro, King County Metro, which is that separate agency from the city of Seattle, says, oh gosh, there's a lot of growth happening in this area. We need to support it with more transit service. And it's a chicken and egg situation that the Planning Commission has spoken about since I've been staffing the Planning Commission. So, but just a better understanding of how infrastructure investments are made and decisions are made. We can speak briefly to that as a tag along to the point that you're making.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for making a speech about something that was actually already covered in here. It was unnecessary. I'm gonna call on Jamie next.
I just wanted to follow up on that. I thought you framed that really well, Michaela. So I think it's also helpful to like add some context to the bullet point. So I think that was helpful. I just wanted to flag in the renter commission letter, they do call out the arterials thing. They say the mayor's proposed draft also concentrates growth in neighborhoods that already have high density and places most new multifamily housing along loud polluted arterials. So it is in alignment with what the renters commission is also saying.
Thanks, Jamie.
Nick, do you want to read your comment or not?
Well, I was just noting, I mean, I still think it's appropriate, Michaela, that you named that just because we are identifying it as a concern. And here, I suppose, we're providing an alternative of like looking at neighborhood centers as an opportunity to take on some of that growth. I think we can always also reinforce that those areas are more walkable or have better transit access or better connections to neighborhoods, because when you prioritize sort of, I think the way that I didn't listen into the select committee meeting when this was discussed, but the way it's framed almost suggests that, it's good like vehicle flow. So therefore it can support the type of density, but those aren't always the best places to put people, as we've all talked about as a commission. And so, yeah, kind of dumping housing there without any corresponding improvements to walkability or transit access or actual connections to neighborhoods or places. That's, I think, something we've all been talking about and flagging for area of concern. And the comment I noted was just, yeah. Oh yeah, I don't need to read it out loud because we already covered it. Thanks.
Okay. Matt Malloy.
I had a comment that's not related to arterials, so if anybody wants to add to that, I'll wait a second in case someone wants to go before me. Okay, well, I have a couple comments. First, I wanted to shout us all out for the chat, which has been really funny today, and so I just want to thank us for bringing good humor into the chat as commissioners. Part two, I wanted to ask my fellow commissioners if we want to strengthen the language on slide 5 about the need to maintain LR3 zoning and centers to provide housing choice in more neighborhoods. Maintain kind of makes it sound like we want to preserve what's already in the existing plan. And that kind of seems like where we might be at politically, given the council's inclinations. Do we want to say something bolder than maintain, like expand? Because I think that's in our discussion that LR3 zoning is essential to most of the things that we've been talking about. But I also don't want to add new material that's not consistent with what we've said in the past letter. So if we've like had a language of maintain, then probably stick with maintain. So maybe staff can also correct me on that.
Okay, so I think this came up in our neighborhoods and housing and neighborhoods committee meeting, and I think it came from Dylan. And staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, and Dylan's not here today, but what I think he was saying was that the current proposal in neighborhood centers is to allow LR3, and that we need to make sure that that allowance is maintained in the final proposal or the final plan. Is that what he was saying, Vanessa?
I'm looking to Olivia. I think
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
And it's on my list to like follow up with Dylan and follow up with Matt.
That's my understanding of Dylan's comment. Yeah, it's a concern that based on council discussion so far, that those LR3 zones may be cut down or removed. Not all neighborhood centers have LR3 or that much of it. It varies across them. Some are more just LR1 and LR2. But I think because the LR3 zoning really gets to that mid-rise density that allows multifamily apartment type housing is why he's focusing on that. And yeah, I think it's mostly out of a concern that what has been proposed will be reduced.
So maybe a way to frame that makes Matt feel more comfortable is critical to allow LR3 zoning, language like that, maybe. I know, Zio, you were also fluent in these conversations when we were having
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I think, so in the conversation we had, LR3 zoning expansion in neighborhood centers was seen as a positive. To Olivia's point, it's very few of them that have it. And it feels like at the point where we're presenting these slides to council, the comment is like, keep them. Like it's unlikely that we're adding more density to the zoning map. Yeah, it seems like at this sort of juncture. And so given that, like where we're at in the phase and like what the audience for this is, I'm leaning, I think maintain might be the right phrasing. But Matt, I agree with you, and I think we've had previous conversations that it would be great if more of the neighborhood centers had more LR3 zoning in them.
Yeah, that's where I'm like, I'm not like a master of the art of the deal or anything, but like in negotiation, if this is a negotiation with council, saying maintain when we actually all want expand or something. I don't know if this is something we'll have a chance to follow up with Dylan about that language, but it's just something I wanted to speak out about, just because I think internally we all would probably say expand if that was an option, but also it's also late in the game they're probably not going to make adjustments to the comp plan at this point. So
Yeah, and I don't know if we're all in alignment around that approach at this point
that's true.
of the game.
And I have one more comment too. We're moving on from this, which would be about corner stores, because I've been kind of carrying the torch a little bit on the corner store conversation. But I know there's like statewide legislation being proposed right now, but there's no bullet point about corner stores discussed so far. I don't know if any other commissioners wanted to voice anything about that. Don't I think maybe we should leave it out, but I just wanted to leave space in case anybody wants to change my mind on that.
My take
Yeah,
on what
this is
was
Vanessa.
Oh, go ahead, Vanessa.
Sorry, Michaela.
It's okay.
We identified, we've sort of pulled together the suggestions thus far based on what has been brought up in committee. And really speaking to the questions, comments that city council members have made in the select committee hearing, not hearing, in the select committee meetings. So we're not suggesting that we completely reiterate everything that we said in our previous stands on the comp plan, but rather really try to tailor our presentation to what we have heard council members have asked the most about. And I'm looking at my colleagues. I don't recall corner stores being a particular, I don't recall it coming up. That doesn't mean it hasn't, and it doesn't mean that it won't. So depending on the timing of our presentation to the select committee, there will probably be presentations after us, like further down the calendar as well as before. So for example, I believe what's on the select committee as a tentative for next week is to do a very high level overview of all the elements in the plan. It may come up in that. So we're in a bit of a tricky situation because we're trying to be responsive to meetings that may not have happened yet. That's a long answer to your question comment.
That makes sense. And I think I did miss a meeting at some point in the last couple months. So thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
All right. I guess
I
my
did wanna-
reaction. Yeah. Go ahead, Vanessa.
No, you go ahead. I was about to say something off topic.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Just circling back a little bit to a comment that Jamie had made. I just resent to you all the materials from the select committee from last week when OPCD staff spoke to the community engagement. And at that same time, they also published the CBO reports, community-based organizations reports on OPCD's site. So just putting that back at the top of your inboxes in case you're interested. And if you're really interested, I can send you the recording of the meeting if you want to listen to that as well. Or you can find it on the clerk's website, on the select committee on the comp plan website.
All right, it seems like we have drawn out a lot of comments today, so appreciate everybody's engagement. Any final folks want to put their names in the queue to help shape the presentation that goes to council? Theo.
I think the points that we have on displacement are good. And I think I have only skimmed kind of the most recent sort of publications coming out on displacement. But my maybe underinformed sense is largely that a lot of that is the existing anti-displacement plan that we have or programs that we have in place. And then some more study dashboard approaches to displacement in the future. And so I just think that we should continue to be concerned about anti-displacement policies and programs that are outlined in the plan as, not expanded. And then I think to kind of previous conversations that we've had in the commission while I've been a part of it, displacement is not just residential, but also cultural and commercial and institutional. And I don't have a concise bullet point on that, but I don't know. I still feel uncertain about what the plan actually is for anti-displacement.
I think OPCD is uncertain on that plan as well. I think that's part of it. Can you go back to what we said in our letter on housing and displacement? At the time we reviewed, we appreciated that they listed out existing policies throughout the plan, but it was unclear to us how these policies would be used together as one cohesive strategy. And then question how the city would hold itself accountable to the community organizations that participated in the draft. So I think what you're surfacing, Zio, is not new, a new concept for us. And I think it's very consistent with what we said in the past.
Yes. I will resend another email. Sorry, I'm just cluttering up your inboxes, but after the January 29th Select Committee on the Comprehensive Plan meeting, when the Office of Innovation and Performance presented their analysis of the city's anti-displacement plans and programs, and they titled their presentation Action Plan. The day after that, the mayor released an executive order regarding very much taking the recommendations of that action plan, most of which, or a lot of which, was better coordination across city departments in the programs that are anti-displacement programs that are carried out by a variety of different offices and departments in the city. And then also boostering, and not necessarily, it didn't say give resources to, but definitely putting more of a spotlight on a dashboard. And that's a database that the city demographer Diana Canzaneri has been working on since for years and years. So while doing a lot of other work. So I think the commission could reiterate that this is a great start comment on the anti-displacement work. Sort of that statement of this is a good place to start. We don't want to backslide. Mm-hmm. We want to, this is the floor from which we build. And to note support of the executive order, and look forward to the city leadership that will actually allocate resources to carry out that executive order.
Yes. I concur, Vanessa. Okay. Are we done? Any final comments? I think we're nearing the end of it. I am going to formally wrap us up on this piece. And Vanessa, I know we had somebody who was trying to give public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Was there any communication with them, and any, did you receive any emails to be read into the record?
I did not receive any emails. So okay. Hopefully that individual will send it to me, and I will send it all along to you, and we will work on the instructions to provide for people to unmute themselves, because we are not able to unmute people. What's the reason why?
It's a privacy concern.
Privacy
to
concern.
Unmute people without their permission. So we can't just, open people's mics in case they're talking. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect timing. Although we have passed our public comment period for this meeting, we do have time, and with your permission, Chair, I will read into the record the comment that the individual earlier was trying to read in herself, but our technology was not our friend.
Okay, yes, please do.
All right. Greetings, Planning Commission. Last night, I attended a meeting of the Wallingford Community Council with Director Rico Kirandongo and Comp Plan Manager Michael Hubner. About 50 community members attended. There was agreement that outreach to property owners was absent. One of the major areas of concern is the difference between the 20-year growth target required under GMA, 120,000 housing units, and the one Seattle plan's much higher upzone of 330,000. There was not a good explanation from OPCD, except that it is to give developers more choices in more neighborhoods. There was much discussion of the immediate effect of upzoning regular bus arterials from 3 stories to 5 stories, shading solar panels, trees, and gardens, immediately escalating land values and therefore property taxes, resulting in pressure from developers to sell, disinvestment in existing homes, economic displacement, a potentially deteriorating neighborhood, especially for families. I asked Director Kirandongo about the pending transportation-oriented development bill HB 1491 that he agrees is likely to pass. I requested a map that shows that just the upzones required by HB 1110 and this HB 1491, that is 4 and 6 units in neighborhood residential zones and mid-rise within half mile of light rail station areas and 1/4 mile of bus rapid transit stops, with 10% low-income housing required in close proximity to major transit. He agreed to produce a map. These requirements can adopt it as the minimum to meet these and GMA requirements with the intent of revisiting creation of other neighborhood centers when local input and local planning can be done in partnership. There are obvious places where environmental and other local impacts were not considered, such as steep slopes in Madrona and Greenwood at 65th and poor transportation access in West Green Lake, which straddles Aurora. The timing of the October release of the neighborhood center maps without an EIS and without written notice to affected business and homeowners likely violates the GMA. The elimination of neighborhood plans certainly violates the spirit of the Middle Housing Bill. Another takeaway is that the city needs to require incentivized 3-story multifamily rentals, stacked flats, or courtyard buildings as a means of providing more families with access to neighborhoods. Otherwise, we will be a city of townhomes, which excludes seniors, families with small children, and people with disabilities. Making 1-story homes for seniors to downsize should be a priority. Sarah Jane Siegfried, Community Housing Advocate.
Thank you. I'm really glad we were able to read her comment into the record. Can you email that to the commissioners after the meeting?
I will do that.
Thank you. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Are there any formal items of business you need to take care of, Vanessa?
No.
No. All right. With that, I adjourn our meeting. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Stay warm.
Thank you.
Stay warm.
Thanks, everyone.